Welcome back to another episode of the TBE podcast. Today I'm joined by Hendrik Brandis, the co-founder of Earlybird Ventures, a VC fund based in Germany that invests in technology innovators. So Hendrik, welcome to the TBE podcast. How are you doing today?
Very well. Good morning. I'm sitting here in the snowy Munich, and I'm happy that I made it to the office, actually, because we have so much snow since we haven't had since years.
Awesome. So what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a pretty healthy breakfast this morning at home, and my standard muesli and fruits. So I feel well prepared for what's coming today.
Awesome. And what is the one thing you would have changed differently before you turned 20?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I must say I'm pretty pleased and happy and grateful what life has brought so far. So there's nothing what I would really regret. At times, I think I should have tried to balance my personal life a little bit more between business and professional life and private life. So I was always hardworking. Maybe if I look back in a couple of years, I may say that I should have shifted priorities slightly, not always, but at times.
Cool. And what is your favorite company right now, apart from Earlybird?
Within you're talking about startups, or you're talking about a company at large? So it could be Apple or whatever.
Any company.
Yeah, I mean, this morning I must say it is actually N26. Since we announced this morning a tremendous funding round and the company's doing extraordinarily well. It's not even 5 years old, and it is really growing fast. And I don't see any reason why that should not continue for the next years to come. So I'm really energized and enthusiastic what I'm seeing there. But there are many more small companies, or even in the meantime, mid-sized companies as N26 within our portfolio, which I know a little bit more from the inside, which are really making me enthusiastic and which I think will have a great future. I mean, if we're coming to large companies, I'm really impressed by the expansion and land grab strategy of the big digital companies. In the first place, Amazon and Google. I'm really impressed what they have achieved and what they still at that size continue to achieve. It's amazing. Is it good or not for the global economy? That's a different discussion, but I'm full of admiration what they're doing.
Well, we'll talk about N26 shortly, but for our audience who don't know anything about you, could you just summarize your career to date in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'm an aerospace engineer by training. Started my professional career in aircraft development, where I spent 3 years at the military aircraft division of a company called Messerschmitt-Boelkow-Blohm, which is now part of Airbus. Before I joined McKinsey by chance, because McKinsey was serving MBB and I was on the client core team, got to know them. Spent then 5.5 years with McKinsey, always with a passion for small entities. So I launched a mid-sized company initiative to also consult smaller entities, and that went then even further. And we launched McKinsey New Venture, starting to support startups, which actually ended in an initiative where McKinsey supported business plan competitions for the first place in the years of 94, 95 in Munich and Berlin. That brought me in touch with the venture industry, or the almost not existing venture industry, I must say, at these days in Germany. And since I was always inclined and was dreaming of becoming self-employed and an entrepreneur at some point of my life, I actually decided shortly after partner election McKinsey, to leave McKinsey and to co-found Earlybird, and that was in '97. And since then, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm with Earlybird, and I must really say I love what I do. I perceive it as a huge privilege to have the opportunity to work in this industry, to sense to be at the pivot of technological developments and see companies like N26, UiPath, and others grow and fight for others which are not yet there and which hopefully will get there. I really think it's a great, and I wouldn't even call it a profession, a business. I would call it a profession. And as said, I think it's for me, it's the right thing to do.
You co-founded Earlybird over 21 years ago now. How and why did you want to enter the world of VC? As said,
I was brought in touch with the world of VC through the McKinsey business plan competitions, and I was brought in touch with lots of energized, young, impressive entrepreneurs who were out and seeking funding and had lots of difficulties to find that funding. I was trying to support them, was digging into that industry, talking to the very few investors who are around it these days. And I felt that there's a big need and a big opportunity for professionally managed venture capital, and that actually brought me to the decision to co-found Earlybird with my founding partners. In hindsight, I think it was a pretty courageous decision because I didn't have any venture investment experience in these days, and fundraising was extremely difficult. As you can imagine, money is shy, especially in the total absence of any track record. And we've been pretty fortunate with respect to the timing, I must say. We started in '97, and we had a tough time to collect even the first 5 million euros. It took us more than 1.5 years. And the most capital actually came from my former McKinsey partners, saying, you're stupid to leave McKinsey, but we know you personally, so I invest part of my annual bonus here. And then, the NOE.MI took off in '98 in Germany, and all of a sudden, track record wasn't actually the topic anymore. People were just afraid to miss the train, and fundraising became much easier than previously, and we could fill up the first fund to a critical size and got started. And then we actually learned our profession as we went. Committed lots of mistakes, I must say, but did a few things right, and these few things right are the reason why we're still active and could grow and professionalize the firm over the last 2 decades.
So you said there you had no track record. How do you convince your first LPs to invest in your fund?
As I said, the first LPs were predominantly person out of my family and friends circle, so predominantly coming from McKinsey, who knew me personally, and I had the privilege to have their trust, even in the absence of any track record. And that led to the very first close of a little more than 5 million euros, divided into lots of smaller private tickets. And as I said, and then the NOE.MI took off, and all the sentiment and turned around, and I sensed what it means if somebody talks about the madness of the crowd. People were just chasing us because we wanted to get engaged in these, the vertical of tech in Germany. Digital tech wasn't really digital at that point of time; it was rather IT. But people were really chasing investment opportunities here because of the buoyant public markets. That helped us to find a critical mass, and then we got started. And fortunately enough, the first fund, even though started at a tough time, so the first fund actually really started investing in '99, So a little bit of time to invest in high valuations and no time to exiting. It was actually the fact, but still that fund delivered a relatively good multiple. So we ended up the fund with a multiple of north of 4x. And that helped us to then build on that track record in the next generations and to launch and raise successor funds.
Fantastic. So what sectors does Earlybird focus on? And can you tell us some of the companies right now that are in your portfolio, especially N26?
Yeah, I mean, if I start with N26 and the announcement took place this morning, fintech is an important sector for us. It's always been. We had significant successes there. Our very first unicorn back in 2005 came out of the fintech space. So we continue to believe that the finance industry is a huge one, and there are lots of rooms for further disruption based on technology as pure internet, as cloud, as blockchain and AI. So fintech is always been and remains to be a focus area. Next thing is logistics, log tech if you want, and we include mobility, new mobility here. It is mobility and increasing logistics is without any doubt a mega trend which will be performed in a much more efficient way based on new technologies, and that creates enormous opportunities for startups. And because of that, we continue to be engaged with companies like Everroad, Movinga, and so forth. Enterprise productivity is another important space. We are covering. I think the most stellar success we have with UiPath, probably for certain the fastest growing software company out of Europe ever. And also in terms of value creation, but also in terms of revenue growth. And I'm missing one. We call it, for the fourth one, sorry for that. We call it, we mean with that, so we are not a big investor into e-commerce, pure e-commerce place. It's something we haven't done, and we're probably not prepared to do in the future. But we are still interested and have done a number of investments in the area of online marketplaces and retail supporting technology, enabling technologies, which we think have a great future, because again, also the retail industry is a huge one, and we basically love huge markets, which opened up significant opportunities through disruptions.
So N26 raised $300 million. That was announced this morning. Congratulations. How did you first come across N26?
N26, I think, came into our Berlin-based team both through a personal network. People did know the founding team, and it came even through another kind of channel at the same point of time as Ryan. But we've been in touch very early, and we've been the very first institutional investor into N26. At that point of time, it was a vision presented by a very convincing, energized young founder team, both coming from Austria, moved to Berlin, and we actually bought into that vision and committed the first millions.
So I'm sure, like many entrepreneurs, you've had lots of ups and downs. What's the biggest challenge for you personally as a entrepreneur, and what's been that biggest obstacle that sticks to you pretty much every day?
I Obviously, it is. If you look at our profession, there are basically 3 steps of value creation. It's deal selection, deal development, and deal disinvestment or divestment. I think if I really believe it, or think about value creation, it's probably more than 50% of the value creation takes place in the very first step, deal selection. So looking at the enormous deal flow and coming up with the effective system of filtering these enormous deal flow down to the very few relevant ones, I think is a very significant challenge, and trying to professionalize that process to the extent possible, so that on the one hand side we achieve our objective, also our fiduciary duty in front of our investors to select the very best opportunities, but at the same point of time treat the entrepreneurs seeking funding with all the respect they deserve, and trying to support them to the extent possible. I think that is really, really difficult. We're seeing roughly 8,500 deals out of Europe every year, and we're doing around 15 new investments. So the ratio is quite steep, if you want, if I may say so. Doing this with the highest possible level of professionalism and respect is a challenge, and we're trying to become better every day. Especially doing this in the early stage, I think, is not easy, because the opportunity to do deal selection based on pure analytics is somewhat limited, because we typically talk about visions for businesses which are not yet in existence. So there obviously are an analysis we can perform, and that is something we continuously do. But at the very end, it boils down to the most important criteria, which is an assessment of the capabilities of the entrepreneurial team. And as we all know, the assessment of the abilities of people is a subjective matter, and it's not easy to do. We're trying to be as professional and as good as we can here. And obviously, in the case of N26, we have exactly the right team. But I must also admit that there are more examples where we have failed. So we all celebrating the success cases, but no one should forget that there are more failures than successes.
And talking about failures, I saw you had one interesting instance where you gave an entrepreneur some money and they went off somewhere and you never found them. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, I mean, after shortly 22 years in this industry, one experiences incidences which you couldn't imagine before. And so we had one investment where we committed 4 million euros as a Series A, and shortly after that money went into the company, the entrepreneur disappeared. I mean, when I say disappeared, I mean he disappeared. So he was just gone. So we were trying to find him with the police internationally, with everything. He was just gone. He didn't take anything, but he was just gone. And after a couple of weeks, we were trying to replace him, which is always extremely difficult, as you can imagine, if you bet on a person with a certain vision for a certain market. Finding somebody who can fill out that place equally good is a mission almost impossible, and we failed with that. So finally, we lost the money there. After a while, we've been contacted by the entrepreneur, who then said that he decided, and he apologized and said he decided to just start a totally different life. he grew up in a very conservative family here in Germany, and he had his coming out and admitted that he's homosexual, and he just went to the US and totally disconnected with everything he lived in before, including his startup and our investment. So that's one true story I went through. We had other failures, but this is a very special one.
So did you finally get your money back, or was that complete?
No money back. It was, we were trying, and we were, obviously he was not alone. There was a team, and we tried to replace him, but he was clearly the head of everything here. And he was the software guy, and we were trying to find people replacing him. And at that stage, you always have the hope that it's going to go, you're going to be successful with that. But at the end of the day, the money was burned. We couldn't get it out again, and the company filed for insolvency. So that was a big failure.
Interesting stories.
We could have pulled the plug right after he disappeared. I know, in hindsight, I agree with that. But we didn't. But we didn't do that. We were trying to rescue the investment by because we believed in the vision, and we tried to find somebody who can replace the entrepreneur. And we always had for quite some time, we had the hope that the entrepreneur might return. So, it's a lesson.
Interesting. I haven't heard that before. I hope it doesn't happen again to you.
No.
And I guess just rewinding back, when you talk about deal flow, what is the biggest bugbear you have when entrepreneurs come and pitch to you?
If they come and we spend the time together, if they're not well prepared, if they're not coming to the point, if they the concept they pitch to I don't know, a 2 or 3 minute or even shorter summary, and say, this is the essence, what it's about, then that is something which usually concerns me, because it raises the question whether that entrepreneur can focus on the right things. Because if you start a company, there are millions of things you need to do, and it is virtually impossible to do everything at the right point of time. So keeping focus is probably one of the most important things to secure success. So if people are not able to focus in their presentations and say, these are the key things, and if I really have to boil it down, this is what really matters and make the difference. If they're unable to do that, that's something which tend to shy me away. Second thing is, if I get the impression that they're not really open to discuss and to team up with others, it's always, you get a certain sense how they react on questions and ideas, and even if they're only provocative, if they are they have a constructive way of dealing with that, or whether they immediately start to become defensive. That's something which I think find less attractive. So there are a couple of things. At the end of the day, obviously we need to believe in the concept, but we also, this is the bigger thing for the pitch. If we have a personal meeting, we have to be convinced that this team really will make it.
And just to finish off, what is the plan for Earlybird in the next 5 years?
Obviously, we try to continue to be as successful as we have been, especially in the last year. I think we have 2 new unicorns. I think there were 17 counted as new unicorns in 2018. 2 of them came from Earlybird, and I think even the 2 most valuable ones with UiPath and Android 6 we hope that we can continue that path in 2019 and further. So we will hope that we will see more of our portfolio companies joining N26UI path in the family of European unicorns. If we continue to be successful with that, I'm totally convinced that we will continue to show very good performance for our LPs, and if we show good performance to our LPs, fundraising will not be an issue. We've been lucky in the last year. We could close our most recent fund at the hard cap, so we could have taken in even more money. If we continue to perform as we could perform in the last years, I think we can be optimistic to look ahead. We have initiated a strategic partnership with DRIV, a UK-based firm, which will give us a larger footprint also in the UK and Ireland, which we haven't had in the past. So we've been predominantly active in continental Europe. I think opportunities become increasingly pan-European, if not global, but at least in the first place pan-European. And I'm inclined by the perspective which is opened up through this strategic cooperation. Lots of things to do and to tackle, but I'm full of energy and looking ahead what's coming.
And to finish off, would you like to see N26 IPO?
I mean, for the time being, I think it's not on the agenda. Obviously, it's an option. The company, I think, would be able to find public market investors if they would seek money. For the time being, I mean, what are the reasons to IPO a company? You either want to raise money and for further expansion, and/or there are shareholders who want to sell off their shares and change shares into money again. I think both reasons are not yet in existence. In N26, the company has just raised all the money they currently need, and we find huge interest to invest even more. So the round was oversubscribed. So I think access to money is not the reason. And what I hear from the current investors, that everybody's saying that they want to accompany the further growth path of N26. So I haven't heard from anybody that they want to sell off. And I think all the existing investors have also participated in the current round. So for the time being, it's simply there. I don't see a reason why to put that on the agenda. But if one would like to think about a midterm perspective, that could certainly be an option. Because at some point of time, also, we as Earlybird need to sell, and others may need to sell as well.
Awesome. Well, Hendrik, thanks so much for your time, and have a great 2019.
Thank you very much.